The Valkyrie Empire stretched across 3,000 star systems and ruled over 500 conquered species with an iron fist that had never known defeat. For 10,000 years, their warships had burned across the galaxy, and their armies had crushed every resistance they encountered. But war was not what the Valkyrie loved most. What they loved most was the hunt. Every noble house in the empire measured its worth not by wealth or political power, but by the trophies that hung in their grate halls. The skull of a Kethrani serpent, whose acid could melt through starship armor in seconds. Mounted head of a Mordak stalker that could run faster than ground vehicles and see in complete darkness. The preserved body of a void drake that swam through the emptiness between stars and fed on solar radiation. These were the prizes that brought honor to a Valkyrie family. These were the kills that turned young hunters into legends. The greatest hunters in the empire held titles and lands and commanded respect that even admirals and generals could not match. High Huntmaster Varric Shal was the most decorated hunter in 3 generations. He had killed creatures on 200 worlds, and his trophy hall filled an entire space station that orbited his home planet. When the survey ships returned from the far edge of the galaxy with news of a small blue world called Earth, Varric Shal was among the first to review the wildlife reports. He gathered his fellow hunting masters in the great viewing chamber aboard his personal vessel, and they watched the footage. Together, lions sleeping in tall grass while females did all the hunting, wolves running in packs because they were too weak to hunt alone, bears so slow and lazy that they spent half the year sleeping in cave sharks that could be defeated by punching them in the nose. Of Varric Shal laughed so hard that his gill slits ached and tears ran from his 4 eyes. The other hunting masters joined him in his amusement. These were the apex predators of Earth. These soft and slow and simple creatures were the best that evolution had produced on this unremarkable world. I have seen more dangerous animals in petting zoos for children, declared Huntmaster Krell Voth as he watched footage of a tiger lounging in the shade. My youngest daughter could kill one of these bears with her training blade, added Lady Scythe Mora, while a grizzly on the screen caught fish in a river with the laziness of someone who had never known real danger. No venom, observed Varric Shal as he scrolled through the biological data. No natural armor worth mentioning. He continued. No bioelectric discharge or psychic capabilities or molecular acid. The largest land predator masses barely 600 kilograms, and it moves so slowly that any Valkyrie child could outrun it. He closed the files and shook his head with a smile that showed all 3 rows of his teeth. Earth is not a hunting world, he declared. It is a vacation destination for young hunters who want easy first kills without any real danger. We shall classify it as a recreational preserve and nothing more. The other hunting masters agreed without argument within one standard. The Valkyrie Empire had added Earth to its territory. The humans who lived there had put up a brief resistance that the Imperial fleet had crushed in less than a week now. They serve as a client species under Valkyrie rule, and they watched helplessly as alien ships descended from the sky to hunt their wildlife for sport. Humans tried to protest at first. They sent representatives to speak before the Imperial Council and explain that their animals deserve protection. They talked about ecosystems and conservation and the complex balance of nature. The Valkyrie listened politely and then ignored everything the humans said. What did these primitive beings know about anything? They had barely discovered space travel when the Empire found them. They still fought wars among themselves over patches of dirt and abstract ideas. They were centuries away from being considered a civilized species by galactic standards. The hunting expeditions began in earnest. Young Valkyrie nobles traveled to Earth in luxury vessels and hired human guides to lead them to the best hunting grounds. They posed for images with dead lions and mounted tiger heads on their walls. They bragged to their friends about how they had killed great white sharks with Nothing but a vibroblade, though they always left out the part about the personal shields and breathing apparatus and emergency. Teleport beacons. Earth became famous throughout the Empire as the perfect place for a hunter's first killed animals. Were large enough to look impressive in trophy images. They were exotic enough to spark conversation at noble gatherings, and they were weak enough that even the most incompetent young hunter could bring one down without any real risk. The human population watched all of this with a strange expression that the Valkyrie never bothered to understand. It was not quite anger and not quite sadness. It was something more like patience, like they were waiting for something. The Valkyrie paid no attention to such things. They were too busy enjoying their easy hunts and cheap trophies. They were too confident in their superiority to notice the quiet fury building behind human eyes. They were too arrogant to remember that they had only studied the most famous of Earth's predators. They had looked at the lions and tigers and bears and declared the whole planet weak. They had never thought to look closer at the smaller creatures, the ones that did not appear in nature documentaries, the ones that did not live in zoos, the ones that survived in the harshest places on Earth, not because they were the biggest or the strongest, but because they simply refused to die. In the frozen wilderness of northern Canada, there lived a creature that weighed less than 20 kilograms. It had no venom and no armor and no special powers. It was not fast or graceful or particularly intelligent, but it was something else entirely. It was something the Valkyrie had never encountered in all their thousands of years of hunting across the galaxy. It was something that would teach them a lesson they would never forget, and that lesson was about to begin. Young Lord Thyrek Shao was the only son of High Hunt Master Vorik. Shao and the weight of his father's legacy pressed down on him like a mountain. Every day he walked through trophy halls filled with creatures that would haunt the nightmares of lesser beings. Every night he listened to stories of hunts that had made his father famous across 100 worlds, and every moment he lived with the knowledge that he would soon face his coming-of-age hunt, and the entire empire would be watching to see if he could live up to his family name. The coming-of-age hunt was the most important moment in any young Valkyrie noble's life. It was the day when a child became an adult. It was the day when a hunter proved their worth. The choice of prey mattered almost as much as the kill itself. Most young nobles from important families chose something dangerous and impressive for their first hunt. A Kathrani serpent, perhaps, or a young Mordak stalker, or one of the other apex predators that filled the Imperial Wildlife Registry. But Thyrek did not want to do what most young nobles did. He was tired of living in his father's shadow. He was tired of everyone expecting him to be a copy of the great Vorik Shao. He wanted to find his own path, even if he could not explain exactly what that meant. When the time came to choose his prey, he did something unexpected. He spent days searching through the wildlife registry, looking at creatures that no one else bothered to hunt. He scrolled past the famous trophies and the popular choices. He looked at the forgotten entries and the overlooked species, and then he found Gullo Gullo the Wolverine. The registry entry was almost insultingly brief: mass 12 to 18 kilograms, habitat cold northern regions, diet opportunistic, carnivore and scavenger, aggression rating moderate, danger level minimal, recommended hunting party single hunter with basic equipment. There was a small hollow image attached to the file. Thyrek studied it carefully. The creature looked like some kind of small bear, or perhaps a large weasel. It had dark fur and small eyes, and a body built low to the ground. There was nothing impressive about it, nothing that would make other hunters gasp in amazement or nod in respect, and yet Thyrek could not look away from these eyes. There was something in them that the cold statistics of the registry did not capture, something that made him feel like he was being watched rather than doing the watching, something that whispered of danger in a voice too quiet for instruments to measure. "You cannot be serious," his father said when Thyrek announced his choice. Varekshal stared at his son with a mixture of confusion and disappointment that cut deeper than any blade. A wolverine, he repeated as if saying the word again might change its meaning. An animal. That weighs less than your hunting pack. An animal that is not even classified as dangerous. You might as well hunt vermin. Thyrek stood his ground even though every instinct told him to back down and apologize and choose something more appropriate. I have made my decision, he said with a calmness he did not feel. The registry says it is aggressive. I want to see for myself what that means. His father shook his head and the disappointment in his eyes deepened into something close to shame. If you wish to waste your coming-of-age hunt on something so beneath our family's dignity, then I cannot stop you. But know this, when you return with that pathetic creature's corpse and the other noble families laugh at your choice, you will have no one to blame but yourself. Thyrek said nothing. There was nothing to say. 3 days later, he boarded a transport vessel bound for Earth. He brought with him a pulse rifle capable of killing creatures 10 times the Wolverine's size. He brought personal shielding that could stop projectiles and energy weapons in the claws of most known predators. He brought a hunting AI that could track any animal across any terrain. He brought medical supplies and emergency teleportation, beacons and enough survival gear to last a month in the wilderness. Brought everything a hunter could possibly need, and beneath all of that, equipment and technology and preparation, he brought something else. He brought the absolute certainty that his father was wrong. That there was something special about this creature that the registry had missed on something important. He could not explain why he felt this way. He could not point to any evidence or logic that supported his instinct. But as his ship descended through Earth's atmosphere and the frozen wilderness of Canada spread out below him like a white blanket across the world, he felt something he had never felt before. He felt like he was about to learn something that would change him forever. The transport set down in a clearing surrounded by snow-covered trees. Thyrek stepped out into cold air that bit at his exposed skin. He activated his environmental suit and watched his breath form. Clouds in front of his face. Somewhere out there in this frozen wilderness, a small creature with dark fur and unimpressive statistics was going about its daily life. It had no idea that it had been chosen. It had no idea that a hunter from the stars had come to kill it. Had no idea that its death was supposed to be easy and quick and forgettable. But Thyrek was about to discover that Wolverines did not care about what was supposed to happen. They only cared about one thing, and that one thing was something the Valkyrie had never truly understood. The hunt began at dawn on the first day. Thyrek activated his tracking AI and followed the electronic voice through the frozen forest as it led him toward the nearest Wolverine signature. The snow crunched beneath his boots and the cold wind howled through the trees, and the world felt empty and ancient and completely indifferent to his presence. He found tracks within the first hour, large paw prints pressed deep into the snow, leading toward a rocky hillside in the distance. The AI analyzed the tracks and reported that the Wolverine had passed this way less than 3 hours. Thyrek felt his heart begin to beat faster. This was real. This was happening. He was hunting. He followed the tracks all through that first day and into the night. Wolverine seemed to wander without any clear pattern. It moved from place to place with no obvious goal. It dug through the snow in some areas and climbed over fallen logs in others. It left a trail that looped back on itself and crossed its own path. It made no sense to the hunting AI's prediction algorithms. This creature's behavior does not match standard prey patterns. The AI reported with something that almost sounded like confusion. It appears to operate on instinct rather than logic. Recommended strategy: cornering the target in an enclosed space. Thyrek acknowledged the suggestion and kept moving. The second day was much like the first. He tracked the Wolverine across kilometers of frozen wilderness and caught glimpses of dark fur in the distance. The creature seemed aware of his presence, but it did not flee it. Simply kept moving at its own pace, doing whatever it wanted, as if the hunter following it was not worth worrying about. On the third day, Thyric finally got close enough to study his prey through his rifle's magnification scope. The Wolverine was smaller than he had expected. It moved with a strange rolling gait that looked almost clumsy. Its fur was matted with snow and ice and old blood from whatever it had been eating. It was not beautiful or graceful or impressive in any way, but when it turned and looked directly at him through the scope, Thyric felt something cold run down his spine. Those eyes, those small dark eyes, held no fear. They held no concern. They held nothing but a flat, empty patience that seemed to say, "I know you are there, and I do not care." On the fourth day, Thyric made his move. The Wolverine had wandered into a narrow ravine with steep rocky walls on both sides. There was only one way out, and Thyric blocked it with his body. This was at the moment of the kill. He raised his pulse rifle and took aim at the creature. Standing 20 meters away, the Wolverine did not run it, did not try to climb the walls or dig through the snow or hide behind a rocket. Simply turned to face him with those flat dark eyes, and then at target Thyric fired. The pulse blast caught the Wolverine in the shoulder, and the impact sent the small body tumbling through the snow. The shot would have killed a wolf instantly, would have stopped a charging bear in its tracks. The Wolverine got back up. It shook its head once and kept coming. Thyric felt the first flicker of something he had never experienced before. He felt doubt. He fired again, center mass. The pulse tore through fur and flesh, and the creature should have died. By every law of biology, it should have dropped and stopped moving. Wolverine screamed. The sound echoed off the ravine walls and filled the cold air with a fury that seemed too large for such a small body. It screamed, and it kept coming. Thyric's hearts were pounding. Now his hands were shaking. He fired a third time, and a fourth and a fifth. Each shot hit. Each shot should have been lethal. The Wolverine was bleeding from wounds that would have killed anything else 10 times over. And still, it kept coming. It hit him like a missile. The impact drove him backward, and his personal shield flickered as claws designed to tear through frozen meat found the gaps in his armor pane, exploded through his arm as teeth meant for crushing bone, clamped down and refused to let go. Thyric screamed and tried to shake the creature off, but it would not release him. He beat at it with his free hand and felt claws rake across his face. He activated his emergency teleport beacon, and the world dissolved into light. When he reformed on the transport ship, the Wolverine was still attached to his arm. Its jaws were still locked around his flesh. Its claws were still digging into his armor. It was still trying to kill him. It took 3 crew members with plasma cutters to pry the creature's jaws open. By the time they succeeded, Thyric had lost 2 fingers and 1 eye. The Wolverine had been dead for nearly 4 minutes before it finally let go. Thyric lay on the medical table staring at the ceiling with his remaining eye, while the ship's doctors worked to save what was left of his arm. The dead Wolverine lay on a table beside him. Its body was riddled with pulse burns. Its organs had been destroyed by the very first shot. It had been dying from the moment the fight began, and it had kept fighting anyway. It had kept coming. It had refused to stop. Thyric understood something in that moment. He understood why he had chosen this creature. He understood what the registry had failed to capture. He understood the thing in those flat, dark eyes that had called to him across the stars. It was not aggression. It was not instinct. It was something far more terrifying. It was the absolute and complete refusal to accept defeat, no matter the cost, no matter the odds, no matter anything. And as the doctors put him under for surgery, Thyric wondered if perhaps his father had been wrong about more than just the Wolverine. Perhaps the Valkyrie had been wrong about Earth itself. Word of Thyric's hunt spread through the Imperial fleet faster than light itself. Within hours, every hunting vessel in the sector had heard the story. Within days, the tale had reached the homeworld. The son of the great High Hunt Master Varric Shal had gone to Earth to hunt one of its weakest creatures, and that creature had nearly killed him. Some laughed at the news. They called Thyric a failure and a disappointment. They said he had proven himself unworthy of his father's legacy, but others wanted to see for themselves. They gathered aboard the Imperial hunting vessel Glorious Conquest, where Thyric was recovering from his wounds. They filled the medical bay and spilled out into the corridors. They came to mock, and they came to judge, and they came to witness what had become the most talked about hunt in a generation. High Huntmaster Varric Shal stood at the front of the crowd. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes burned with shame as he looked at his son's bandaged body. The medical AI had saved Thyric's arm, but the fingers were gone. Forever advanced cloning could replace the eye, but the scars on his face would remain. He would carry the marks of this hunt for the rest of his life. "Show us the creature," demanded Huntmaster Krelvoth with contempt dripping from every word. The medical team brought forth the Wolverine's body on a floating examination table. It looked even smaller in death than it had in life. Its fur was burned and torn and soaked with blood. Its body was riddled with wounds that made several hunters wince despite themselves. 5 direct hits from a pulse rifle, the medical AI reported in its flat mechanical voice. Each shot delivered enough energy to kill a Mordax stalker. The creature suffered catastrophic organ failure within seconds of the first impact. By all biological metrics, it should have died immediately. Instead, it continued to function for 3 minutes and 47 seconds. It continued to fight for 3 minutes and 47 seconds. It maintained a lethal grip on the target for 4 minutes and 12 seconds after biological death. The room fell silent. "Impossible," declared Varric Shal as he stepped forward to examine the data. "The creature's biology does not support this level of damage resistance. It has no redundant organs. It has no regenerative capabilities. It should have died from shock and blood loss within the first 10 seconds. He turned to the medical AI with frustration in his voice. "Explain this." "I cannot." The AI admitted. "The data does not match any known biological model." The creature simply refused to stop. A voice spoke from the back of the room. "Perhaps I can explain." The crowd parted to reveal a human male wearing the simple uniform of an Imperial wildlife consultant. He was one of the servants that the Valkyrie kept around to provide information about Earth's animals. Most of the time, the hunters ignored him completely. Now, every eye in the room turned toward him. "Speak," commanded Varric Shal. The human stepped forward with a careful expression that revealed nothing of what he was thinking inside. "With respect, High Huntmaster, you are measuring the wrong thing. You are looking at the Wolverine's physical capabilities and trying to understand how it survived such damage. But survival was never the point." He pulled up a holographic display and began showing footage from Earth's historical archives. "The Wolverine is not built to resist damage," he continued. "It is built to ignore damage. There is a very important difference." The footage showed a Wolverine facing a grizzly bear that was 40 times its size. The bear roared and swiped, and the Wolverine dodged and bit and refused to back down. Eventually, the bear gave up and walked away. Wolverine stood over the food it had been protecting and began to eat. "This is not unusual behavior," the human explained. "Wolverines regularly fight animals that could kill them with a single blow. They do this not because they think they can win. They do this because the concept of losing does not exist in their minds." More footage. Playday. Wolverine climbing a sheer ice cliff in the middle of a blizzard to reach a frozen carcass that hung from a ledge. Wolverine traveling 80 kilometers through deep snow in a single night to find food. A Wolverine caught in a steel trap who chewed through its own leg to escape, and then survived another 6 years in the wild. Your Imperial Wildlife Registry rates aggression on a scale that measures how likely a creature is to attack, the human said, but that scale was designed for animals that calculate risk. Animals that weigh their chances and make decisions based on logic. The Wolverine does not calculate. The Wolverine does not weigh chances. The Wolverine simply decides that it will not lose, and then it acts on that decision until its body physically cannot move anymore. He paused and looked around the room at the assembled hunters. "You asked what makes Earth predators dangerous," he said quietly. "It is not size. It is not venom or armor or special abilities. It is that our world never taught its creatures when to quit. Evolution on Earth did not select for the strongest or the fastest. It selected for the most stubborn." The room was completely silent. Now every hunter was staring at the small broken body on the examination table with new eyes. They were seeing something they had never seen before in all their thousands of years of hunting across the galaxy. They were seeing an animal that did not know how to give up, and somewhere in the back of their minds, a small voice was asking a question that none of them wanted to answer. If Earth's animals were like this, then what did that say about Earth's dominant species? What did that say about the humans? The wildlife consultant seemed to hear that unspoken question. He smiled a small, careful smile that did not reach his eyes. "The Wolverine is not unique," he said softly. "It is merely the purest example. Everything that evolved on Earth carries some of that same spirit, including us." And then he stepped back into the crowd and said nothing more. 3 imperial months passed after the incident aboard the Glorious Conquest. In that time, the story of Tharek's hunt had spread to every corner of the Empire. It was told in noble halls and military barracks and trading stations and colony worlds. The details changed with each telling, but the core remained the same. A small creature from a weak world had fought a Valkyrie hunter armed with the best weapons and armor the Empire could provide, and it had nearly won the Imperial Wildlife Registry. Received more inquiries about the Wolverine in those 3 months than it had received about all other Earth species combined in the previous 10 years. Hunters wanted to know everything. How did it survive such damage? How did it keep fighting after death? What else lived on Earth that the registry had overlooked? Answers they found disturbed them. Honey badgers that attacked lions without hesitation, Tasmanian devils that bit through bone with jaws stronger than animals 10 times their size army, ants that would march into fire rather than turn back tardigrades, that survived the vacuum of space and temperatures that would freeze or boil any other living thing. And everywhere they looked, they found the same pattern. Earth did not produce the biggest predators. Earth did not produce the strongest predators. Earth produced predators that simply refused to accept that they could be defeated. The Registry's Classification Committee met in emergency session for the first time in 200 years. They reviewed the data and watched the footage and listened to testimony from hunters and scientists and the human wildlife consultants who had been warning them for years. When the session ended, they issued a proclamation that shocked the entire Empire. Earth was reclassified from recreational preserve to extreme hazard environment. Wolverine specifically was elevated to Apex class trophy status. This was the same category that held the Void Drakes and the Kethrani serpents and the most dangerous creatures in the known galaxy. A 20-kilogram animal from an unremarkable blue world now stood alongside monsters that had killed thousands of hunters over the millennia. But something else changed too, something that the official proclamation did not mention, something that happened quietly in the minds of Valkyrie across the Empire. They began watching their human servants differently. They noticed things they had never bothered to notice before. A human worker who broke his arm in a factory accident and kept working for another 6 hours before seeking medical attention. A human soldier who took a plasma burn that would have incapacitated any Valkyrie and stayed on his feet to complete his mission. A human scientist who had been working on the same problem for 40 years without success and showed no signs of giving up to Valkyrie. I always thought humans were soft and weak and primitive. Now they were not so sure. High Hunt Master Varric Shao sat alone in his private chambers aboard the glorious Conquest and stared at a holographic image of the Wolverine. His son had recovered from his wounds and returned to active duty. The scars on his face had become a mark of honor rather than shame. Other young hunters now sought out dangerous prey instead of easy kills. They wanted to prove themselves the way Thyrek had proven himself, against something that would not give up, against something that would test their limits, against something real. Vorek Shal opened his personal log and began to record. We have made a profound error in our assessment of Earth. We catalogued their predators as primitive and unimpressive. We measured their toxicity and their speed and their strength. We found them wanting by every standard we knew, but we failed to measure the one trait that matters most in any hunt, the one trait that the Wolverine and the humans share in equal measure, the absolute and unshakable refusal to accept defeat. He paused and looked out. The viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was spinning through space. Its billions of humans were going about their daily lives under Valkyrie rule. They worked in factories and served in households and did whatever their conquerors commanded. They had been defeated, their military had been crushed, their governments had surrendered, their world belonged to the Empire. Now and yet, Vorek Shal could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. He remembered the way the human wildlife consultant had smiled when he talked about the Wolverine, that small, careful smile that did not reach his eyes. He remembered the quiet fury he had seen in human faces when hunting ships descended to kill their wildlife, that strange expression that was not quite anger and not quite sadness. He remembered the way humans worked and fought and survived things that should have broken them, and he understood at last what that expression meant. It was patience. The humans were waiting. They were waiting the way the Wolverine had waited in that ravine. They were letting the Valkyrie think they had won. They were letting the Empire believe it was safe. And one day, when the Valkyrie least expected it, the humans would do what the Wolverine had done. They would charge. They would fight. They would refuse to stop no matter how many times they were knocked down. They would keep coming until either they won or nothing was left. For Shal finished his log entry with words that would be suppressed by Imperial censors. For decades, we thought we were adding a trophy world to our empire. I begin to fear we have invited something far more dangerous into our domain. Not a species that can destroy us, something worse. A species that will simply never ever stop trying. He closed the log and sat in silence. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and eternal, and somewhere on a small blue world that the Empire had dismissed as weak and unimportant, a species that had evolved alongside wolverines and honey badgers, and all the other creatures that refused to die, was watching the sky. They were learning, they were adapting, they were waiting, and when the time came, they would show the galaxy what Earth had really been teaching its children for 4 billion years. Not how to be the strongest, not how to be the fastest, not how to be the deadliest, but how to be the one thing that mattered more than all of those combined. How to be the one that never gives up. The Valkyrie Empire would remember the lesson of the Wolverine in time. Humanity would make certain of that. The end.